So we've sat down many times, but this is the first time sitting down with you as the Republican nominee for governor of South Carolina, and I know you follow the history like I do. That's generally a good sign for November. Democrats have not won this seat since 1998. Odds are good that you will be the next governor of South Carolina. The mandate that you received on Tuesday, a monolithic show of support from the Republican electorate. Were you even surprised by that margin of victory that you achieved in the runoff on Tuesday?
Oh, absolutely, I was surprised. Look, we went into the election night believing we were going to win. Every poll, internal, external, even people who follow the poly markets, everything pointed to a win, but the size of the win was what we were thinking, and I was just overwhelmed to get nearly 70% of the vote, which I believe is the largest in modern South Carolina history for a non-incumbent governor's race. So yeah, I was surprised at the margin, and I'm incredibly humbled by it.
There's been a lot of coverage of this victory. People always say that success has 1,000 fathers, defeat is an orphan. And a lot of the fathers have stepped forward in this one. A lot of national press saying that Donald Trump pulled you across the finish line. Most of the state folks who have followed this race know that that was not the case. But a lot of the state folks have said, the Ralph Norman endorsement was big for you. So much talk about endorsements, though. What do you think really won this for you?
The number of votes.
Good answer.
No, in all seriousness, there's no one thing. When you're making something like a stew, there's not one ingredient. It's the combination of all the ingredients that gives it its flavor. The same is true with a successful campaign. Look, we were the benefactor of a number of externalities we had no control over, but there was a lot of things that we did control that led. I think the message that we had, my intent was not to make this my campaign about my opponent. And I didn't even really want to make my campaign about me or who endorsed me. Now, did I talk about endorsements? Of course. You have to sell yourself to the people, give them something to buy into. But I really tried to make it about the people, the voters. That was always my focus. While people were saying bad things about me, and I was saying, this is what I want to do for you. And I think people wanted that. I think they were tired of the negativity. I think they wanted a candidate who was going to focus on them. And I said, that's what I told the team. We're going to focus on the people, the voters, and how we're going to make their lives better. Look, I was grateful for President Trump's endorsement. I was grateful for Senator Scott's endorsement, Senator Ted Cruz's endorsement, obviously up to 80+% of the Republican sheriffs.
The Lizard Man?
The Lizard Man. I think the Lizard Man probably had I got a little Lizard Man bump there. Obviously Ralph Norman and Josh Kimbrell and Nancy Mace. Shout out to them, because they didn't have to come out and endorse me. I think collectively those endorsements really signaled to the voters and to their bases that while I may not have been their preferred candidate in the beginning, that I was a candidate that they believed could carry the message that their preferred candidate was running on. And so I'm grateful to all of my former opponents who are my friends for their support, and I think that coalition building is really what helped us. But in the day, it's about message and it's about the voters. The voters are smarter than sometimes government gives them credit for, and I give them the credit in this one.
You mentioned that 70%, that monolithic margin of victory. I want to just run this thought process by you, because less than a month before the primary, the state Supreme Court reversed two highest profile convictions your office secured, the Alec Murdaugh murder convictions, reversed them. And then less than 2 weeks before the vote, Donald Trump, his first endorsement, goes against you, goes for Pamela Evette. Those are two death blows for any ordinary candidacy. And yet, less than a month later, you're at 70%. How does that happen?
So, a friend of ours, someone sent me a clip right after the Trump endorsement, and it's that scene from Rocky Balboa when he's talking to his grown son on the street corner, and he says, it's that clip in that movie where he says, life is not about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and get up and going forward. And I played that clip over a couple of times, and that's so true. Life is not about how hard you get hit. Yeah, we got hit with that reversal. But at the end of the day, I think most people knew that wasn't our fault. It had nothing to do with my office, even though some tried to make it about my office. And the Trump endorsement was a setback, and it was certainly something to be concerned about, but at the end of the day, we believed we could win. We always believed we could win. There was a couple of days there that we were nervous, but when I saw that clip come in, it's like, okay, get back up, Alan. Get up. You can't control those things. Focus on the things you can control and don't stop fighting. And so I kind of viewed it as resiliency training. You know, you have to get knocked down to learn how to get back up. And we got back up and we ran the campaign that we had always wanted to run, and it delivered the result that we got.
Well, in addition to those high-profile developments that occurred in this race at pivotal moments, I got to ask you, you're wearing the jacket here. Is there Teflon on that thing? Because, you know, you got hit a lot. Starting February 2025, Nancy Mace goes on the floor of the U.S. House, just assails you. Millions of dollars in negative ads trying to convince voters what a bad guy you are. How do you survive that?
Well, first off, I mean, I feel like, again, I said it, the voters they're a lot smarter than people give them credit for. I mean, obviously, a negative hit has to be plausible. And I feel like I've been in the public eye for 15 years as an elected attorney general, you know, 16 if you count the year that I ran. And, you know, I think that most voters who know me know that those things aren't true. And of course, you know, there are some people who would believe it, but at the end of the day, I've been around and people know I'm the most investigated candidate. I mean, I've had all the complaints filed against me, all the people who tried to do these investigative exposés on me, the things that have been said about me, all been disproven, all debunked. I saw the commercials that were running the last week or two, and no one believes that I'm corrupt, woke, liberal. I mean, no one believed that. It wasn't plausible. And you know, people who know me know better. And I believe at the end of the day that this is one thing that we always saw in the numbers. My negative ratings never went up. You know, sometimes they would blunt the growth of my favorability rating, but my unfavorable ratings never went up higher than around 25% in the largest one I saw in a poll. And the one thing that pollsters kept telling me is, you're durable. Like, I was a very durable candidate. And I think that is because of, I mean, am I a perfect candidate? Of course not. Have I been perfect at AG? No. I've made my fair share of mistakes. I've learned from those mistakes and gotten wiser because of those mistakes. But, Will, I think at the end of the day, the voters are smarter than people think they are, and I think they saw through it. And also, I think they liked the positive message we pivoted to. They were tired of the negative. They wanted something to vote for, not someone to vote against. And that's what I gave them.
Yeah, great ad with your family, your son Michael, daughter Anna Grace, the stars of that ad in the last week of the race. Really moved some numbers for you. I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned all the ads and the money that's been thrown into this race, particularly money thrown in against you. You were outspent by your chief rival more than 2-to-1 on the airwaves in this race. A lot of self-funders, but when you look at the money that came into this race, you've got millions of dollars spent by Billy Webster on the Democrat side. You've got Ron Reddy spending millions on the Republican side, Ralph Norman. The voters decided ultimately to pick on both sides of the aisle guys that weren't independently wealthy, guys that didn't self-fund their candidacies, guys who kind of came up on their own. What do you think that says about the mood of the electorate across the state?
Look, Will, I have never been in a hotly contested election where I wasn't outspent. I was outspent in 2010. I didn't have a real election in 2014 where there was a lot of money. 2018, I was outspent in the primary. I mean, I'm always outspent. I was outspent in this race. Here's the thing, it's not about, I mean, money is important. You have to have enough money to get your message out, but money isn't the only thing. Message, right? Organization, right? And the skills of the candidate. I happen to think I'm gonna pat myself on the back. I did a good job with my message, and I had a good team around me. I had so many good people, and not just the people on my team, but the volunteers and the supporters all over the state. We invested heavily in a ground game. You know, you just throw money on TV, but if you don't have a ground game with door knocking and actually talking to people, then the money it's really gonna fall flat on the airwaves. So that is what I attribute my ability to survive the avalanche of money that came our way.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you about this. You cleaned up across the state in the runoff election, except for one place. And it's a place that's going to be important in the general election. I'm talking, of course, about Horry County. Now, from my perspective, I think those people are crazy. I think they're a little bit nuts over there in Horry County. But you do have an Horry County problem. A lot of it stemming from this case, the Scott Spivey case, the Stand Your Ground case. Obviously, I've reviewed a lot of the evidence in that case. I know your office has all the evidence in that case. But I wanted to ask you, and I drove through there during the period leading up to the runoff. There were signs that said anybody but Alan Wilson. How do you address that ORE problem in the general election?
Well, I mean, how many counties did I flip from the primary to the runoff? I had a problem in other counties, and that didn't seem to stop me. I mean, the entire upstate, I got over 75% collectively from about 8 or 9 upstate counties. Here's the thing, I don't think I have an Horry County problem. I think there was a narrative out there, a false narrative about that case you mentioned that isn't accurate or true. Most people in Horry County don't know that that case is still being reviewed by another solicitor. People exploited that family. They misled people on the facts of the case. You've seen the narrative out there, and you know that those facts aren't accurate. But listen, I lost Horry County, but it was 45-55. It wasn't like it was 80-20. So, you know, I lost Horry, and of course the other 2 counties, I lost by combined, all 3 counties combined 3,000 votes, which is less than 1% of the total vote count statewide. So I don't think I have an Horry County problem. I think I outperformed in Horry from the first election, and I think I'm going to outperform in Horry in the general. So I don't view it as you can see things as either a problem or you can see them as a challenge and an opportunity. I choose to see that area of the state as a challenge, but more importantly as an opportunity.
Certainly. Thinking about this general election, Jermaine Johnson, your opponent in the general election, Democrat state representative from here in Richland County. As I mentioned earlier, he's someone who has a lot of the same traits you have. Somebody who's kind of come up on his own, built himself up, self-made man. As you look at this upcoming campaign, he's a likable guy, you're a likable guy. I think you guys actually have a pretty good relationship. Yeah. How do you see that campaign shaping up? And given everything that's been thrown at you already, what are you anticipating that you'll get hit with in the general election? And will that Teflon hold up over that race?
Well, look, I'm always going to be durable. And I'm always going to be resilient. I mean, you've covered me for 15 years, and you've heard all of the things that have been thrown at me over 15 years, and I'm going to survive it. Look, Jermaine and I, we spoke earlier today, and we had a very nice, we spoke earlier today. We had about a 5-minute conversation. We're going to have conversations throughout this process. And, you know, what we both agreed is neither one of us wants to sling mud. Now, I do understand that in the heat of a campaign, you know, it's like when you're competing on a basketball court, and I am not playing Jermaine in a game of basketball because he would kill me. But and I've joked with him about that. But you know, bows get thrown, and you get a little pushy there because you're trying to make the basket. Campaigns are kind of like that in a different way. But by and large, I believe that Jermaine is a role model for many people. We've all heard his story. I think he is going to represent the values and the visions of the party that he's been nominated by. I think he truly wants the best for South Carolina. I don't question his motives. I don't question his intentions. I think they're all honorable and good. I think if you interviewed him, I think he would say the same about me. Now, we may disagree on how to bridge from where we are to getting that vision for the future of South Carolina. And I know that he's going to run hard on that. But if I know that someone is an honorable person who has the best in mind, we can disagree on the process and debate that. And if the campaign stays about that, I think this will be a very good general election. And again, I do like him personally. I think he is a good man.
Mm-hmm. There are a few things you said on election night that I wanted to zero in on, and I thought they were interesting. One of the things you remarked that you prayed the morning of the race, and you said that if you won, you wanted the courage and the wisdom to do what needs to be done to lead the state into the future. So I wanted to ask you, what needs to be done to move the state into the future?
Well, will people like the status quo? We hear the term status quo, and it's just become a dirty word. Sometimes the status quo can be a good thing if everything's going well, but sometimes we get comfortable because we're familiar with the things that we know. But getting outside of that comfort box and doing things differently makes people scared. That's why when you talk about changing how we elect judges, when you talk about eliminating the income tax, when you talk about reforming government to make it more transparent, more efficient, more technologically advanced, more responsive, you know, all of a sudden you start going into areas where people are going to reject that because it's not what they know. The governor has to be able to push the legislature and the executive branch out of their comfort zone into the zone of possibility, right? There's what we know and there's what could be. And I said, another thing I said in that speech, I do not aspire to be a transitional governor, meaning a governor that sits between the current occupant and the next occupant, right? I aspire to be a transformational governor, to push South Carolina out of its comfort zone, which means I'm going to have to meet with the legislative leadership. And by the way, not just leadership of the Republican caucus, the leadership and the Freedom Caucus, as well as the Democratic caucus, right? We have to meet with all people, and I'm going to push us out of our comfort zone to do things that we have never tried to do before. And here's the thing, it's not just about doing the right thing, but doing the right thing the right way. We've had governors in the past who came in and had a leadership style that was abrasive and aggressive and off-putting. And then we've had governors that came in and they didn't want to do anything to upset the apple cart or push people out of their comfort zone. I think that you can do both. I think that you can be respectful of the other branch of government. You can work with them to accomplish their priorities, but they need to help you with your priorities. And I plan to be cordial and polite and respectful of that branch of government, but I don't plan on sitting at my desk and waiting for bills to come to my desk and me sign them. I plan to be out there strongly and aggressively advocating for the things that I ran on. The people elected me to do something, and they didn't elect the status quo, they didn't elect more of the same, they want something different, and that is what I aim to give them.
You're a very consensus building guy. I mean, I think the coalition that you put together in the runoff is a testament to your ability to bring people together. And in your speech, after winning this runoff, invited all those factions, sections of the GOP to come together behind your candidacy. You do that incredibly well. But there is also a downside to being good at that. And you mentioned being a transformational governor. One of the criticisms that I've heard from a few people is like, we're worried he's going to be a transactional governor. In getting to an outcome based on these attempts at consensus, do you worry that you might lose some of that thrust of what the people are calling for?
No, not at all. I mean, when they say transactional, what does that mean? You treat me with respect and I'll treat you with respect? That's transactional. When you put a ring on your wife's finger and she puts one on your finger, you make some commitments to each other. That's transactional. I'm not talking quid pro quo stuff. I'm talking about, look, will I go to the legislative leadership? Will I go to the Freedom Caucus? What are your priorities? Let me see. There's a Venn diagram. There's things that I care about. There's things that you care about. There's going to be overlapping. Well, those are the things we should really focus on as a priority. And then the things that we may not totally agree on, we need to work on compromise. But that's going to require give and take on both sides. If I can get 80% of what I want in a bill, I'm not going to blow up the other side because they got 20% of what they wanted or 20% more, right? I'm going to thank them. Now, that doesn't mean I won't come back the next session and try to carve a little bit more away. But at the end of the day, you've got to build coalitions that can pass the best legislation that can do the most good for the most people. Sometimes people come to the negotiation table and they're like, I want everything that I want, and if you don't come along 100% of the way, I'm leaving. And then you end up with zero. If I can get 80%, Will, then I'm going to do that. So when people say the term transactional, that doesn't mean quid pro quo to me. What that means is I'm going to show you the same level of respect, helping you achieve your priorities so long as we can find common ground on your priorities, but I want the same respect in return. So, I'm asking people for the opportunity to let them see my leadership as governor in effect. Let me put it into action for one term. If they don't like it, they get to vote me out in 4 years.
One of the things you said in your victory speech on Tuesday was related to South Carolina's approach to economic development. And it reminded me of Bill Clinton's "the era of big government is over." But I think, and I want to make sure I got this right, you said the era of bad corporate deals that cost taxpayers billions of dollars is over. And you've been one of the most aggressive critics of the Scout deal and the cost overruns there that are being pushed onto taxpayers. I believe the Senate is going to ultimately have to go along with what the House put in the budget on this Scout deal. But let me ask you a two-part question. Number one, if you're governor and that budget comes to you with that additional Scout overrun money in it, would you take that veto pen and line item it out? Well,
first off, I want to wait until I get to see it first, but likely. I mean, that's definitely a possibility. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, this is the budget the governor gets to sign. If we're talking about an entirely new budget next year, I talked about in my plan to eliminate the income tax is to bring the level of government spending down into to the level of population growth. Will, what we're doing is we are spending all the additional revenue we're making and we're feeding it back into government. I would rather take that money and feed it back into the private sector and grow the economy. You get more revenues with a bigger economy, right? And so whether we can do that statutorily with a cap of the rate of government spending each year, if I can get a legislation passed to eliminate the income tax, or if I can do that with the veto pen, absolutely. But let's go back 30 plus years ago. Carroll Campbell, working with a Democratic legislature, right, had to rely on incentives to get BMW here. And every governor since then has had incentives as a tool to help offset some deficiency in South Carolina to attract business. You know, maybe they didn't like our regulatory area here, or maybe they didn't like our litigation environment, or we had a deficit in employment workforce development, or tax policy. We always throw money at the problem, but we should be addressing the underlying cause. If you have a deficiency in government that you have to offset by throwing money through incentives at people, why not go to the underlying issue and try to fix that to begin with? That is kind of my approach. Now, that's not to say that you never have an incentive. I don't like speaking in absolutes because you never know, some unique situation may pop up. But the Scout deal, I don't blame Scout for that deal. They got the best deal they can get. Their lawyers and their people came to the table, and South Carolina went to the table, and they got the best deal. Can you really fault them for that? But now we're $250 million in cost overruns. And my question is, why not give incentives once they reach the metrics they've committed to? They hire X thousand number of people. They produce so much revenue for South Carolina. And then when they hit those markers, then give them the incentive. But there's so many things we can do better. And obviously having all the agencies at the table at the beginning, that deal was rushed. It was rushed. And I think South Carolina was in a race to get them here than to get them here the right way. And that was my issue with that Scout Motor deal.
But even when these deals work, I mean, we're talking about, what is it, 1,600 acres? This is a massive site that just got leveled. Mm-hmm. Tons of people, new people coming in, mm-hmm. adding to the congestion, frankly, changing the calculus of the electorate here. A lot mm-hmm. of people are not just looking at these deals in terms of being bad for taxpayers. They're looking at these deals as changing the complexion of South Carolina. And to be honest, you just won an election based in some small part on the fact that you're from here, were raised here, and your opponent was from Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and look, you're right. I think that the Scout thing was a component of it. That's part of the larger narrative that people want something different. Again, I don't think that was a singular issue that changed the election. That was just one of the many issues. But what I can tell you is this: we're not going to be in a rush to do deals just for the sake of having a crown jewel or a trophy on someone's legacy. There's nothing wrong with wanting to build a legacy, but for me, my legacy is not going to be who's the biggest company that I can get to come here. That right there is not a legacy. I want to change government. I want to change how people see their government and how government people connect with each other. I want to do for South Carolina what other governors have done, like Ron DeSantis in Florida. Whether you like him or dislike him, he was a transformative governor. Now, he had different constitutional powers and different statutory authorities than the South Carolina governor does. But I want to do the most I can with the power of the governor's office. And people have often said that the governor's office is weak. I think you've said that. I think
the state constitution says that, but
here's the thing. The office of the governor is only weak if the occupant is weak. Okay, I believe that if the occupant has a strong will, a strong personality, and can wield the power properly, I think the governor's office can be a lot more effective in dictating the culture of the state, the direction of the state, and what actually comes out of the legislature. Now, you are correct. Relative to the legislature, the office or the executive branch is weaker relative to the legislative power, but it doesn't mean that it's weak. We're just not wielding it effectively, and that's what I want to do as governor. I want the bully pulpit, the microphone of the governor is bigger than any other elected official in the state for state level politics.
I mean, this is the race everyone was focused on.
It was, and I want to use it more aggressively, and I don't mean that to be confrontational, but like, I've used the analogy of a smartphone. You pull your phone out, what percentage of the features on your phone do you think you use? 10% maybe? right? The governor's office has a lot of features that may not be used as much as they should be. I want to do that. I want to make the office of the governor more relevant, not more powerful, but more relevant in the discourse of our state. I've never advocated for the executive branch to be more powerful than the legislative branch. I've always advocated for there to be parity of power between the three branches, which is why I'm so much in favor of judicial selection reform.
Well, the interest of the people that elected you, and I think you're acknowledging this in this conversation, whether it's this economic relief, trying to target the tax relief to them instead of these crony capitalist deals, or whether it's the judicial reform, both of those involve taking either money or power away from the legislative branch. So you're essentially going to have to go to this other branch of government and say, hey, I need you to act against your own self-interest. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, look, the House already passed a pretty good measure in judicial reform. It got gunked up in the Senate. And by the way, only by a handful of people in the Senate, right? So it's not like we're dealing with overwhelming opposition to significant reforms. We're dealing with a few folks who like the way things run right now, either because it benefits them or because they're comfortable with it. It could be both. And it was going to require us to address those areas where those impediments are in the Senate. But I think we can get it done. I really do. And look, I'm going to be realistic. Every single thing I attempt to do, Will, I'm not saying that we're going to be successful on the first try. You've heard my Michael Jordan story, where Michael Jordan was interviewed years ago, and he talked about being the greatest of all time, and he talked about failure. He talked about how they talk about those amazing shots that he took in the last second of a major game where he's made the three-pointer and they won the game and won the national title. He says they don't talk about the thousands of shots that he took that he missed that led to him losing hundreds of games from his entire basketball career. He says he had to fail thousands of times to win enough games to be the greatest of all time. There are going to be times when we try to do something and we miss the net, right? We're going to take shots that we're going to fail. But I don't look at failure as an end. It's a means. You have to fail a lot to succeed. Failure is a necessary ingredient to success. So what I'm asking the people to do is that I plan to take these shots of reforming how we elect judges, how we tax people, how we make government more transparent. You are right. There are going to be people in the institution of the legislative branch who are going to push back on this. But there are a lot of people over there who may not advocate for it, but if they have strong leadership, they'll get on board. And I think there's a lot more people in the legislature open to those reforms than people realize. They just need a strong governor to lead them there.
I'm going to get you in trouble for asking this question. I'm going to watch the folks over there clench a little bit, but let's assume you're elected. Let's assume you're 2 years into a first term. Let's assume you've advanced some important legislation that we've been talking about, and there's some folks standing in the way. Would you run candidates against them? Would you campaign on behalf of opponents of sitting legislators?
First off, that is never, when I'm talking about, I never start with the most aggressive act. I start with, you got to elevate, you go from using your mouth, using your words to maybe a taser to more non-lethal, and then maybe lethal, right? If you want to use the law enforcement analogy. You never start with lethal or aggressive. You always start with, okay, what can we do to help each other? I sit down at the table with someone, I'm always going to say, one of us doesn't have to lose. We can both win if we negotiate properly. I can get the majority of what I want. Let me see if I can give you something you want. That might be that transactional term. But is there something that we can do where we both benefit and I can move the state forward? At the end of the day, I've made a commitment to support the most conservative people that I can support that will move the most conservative agenda that we can get passed, that will do the most good for the most people. And if that means supporting people to run against specific incumbents who are an impediment to the agenda that I was elected by the majority of the people to do, then yeah, that could be a tool, running someone against someone. Again, the status quo can't be the answer. Doing the same thing can't be the answer. But I'm never going to start with that, Will. I'm always going to try to develop a relationship with someone that disagrees with me, and I'm going to try to give peace a chance. Look, there are a lot of people in the legislature that did not support me in this primary. But I am not going to start off with retribution. I'm going to start off from a point of, okay, you were against me. All right, let's see if we can work together. And if I can find common ground with someone, I'm always going to seek it. But if I can't find common ground, then I have to look at all other courses of action. And I think any other human being in my position would say the same thing.
For the next 6.5 months, you are the state's top prosecutor, and you will continue to be in charge of the highest profile prosecution South Carolina's ever seen, the retrial now of accused killer, confessed fraudster, disgraced attorney, Alec Murdaugh.
Mm-hmm.
This retrial has begun to heat up. There's a status conference in the next few days. The defense for Alec Murdaugh, who I think have credibly acquitted themselves, have filed a number of motions. They're seeking a change of venue. They're seeking independent reviews of new evidence in this case. I wanted to ask you, you're still closely following this case. You were a big part of it. You handled one of the key rebuttal witnesses at the trial, literally handling that examination. How hard is that case going to continue to weigh on you? Are you obviously continuing to track it, but over the next 6 months, how hard is that going to be for you to sort of have to maybe hand that off to a new attorney general?
Look, being stressed out is my briar patch. You know, making difficult decisions, living in a complex world is where I've lived for so long. There's always something, people out there who get stressed about something, I'm stressed every single day of my life and have been for the better part of a decade and a half because I have so many important decisions to make. The Murdaugh decision is a very high profile case, but there are other cases out there where people were murdered or assaulted or harmed or defrauded out of their life savings. And to them, their case is just as important as the Murdaugh case is to everyone who follows crime and drama in this country. So I don't differentiate the high profile nature of the Murdaugh trial with any other murder case that involved me, because those families are suffering too. What I will say is this, I'm going to do everything I can over my remaining time as Attorney General to work with our team, and we have most of the team returning from our AG's office. I'm going to work with them to try to get this trial prepped and ready. Obviously, aspirationally, we would have wanted to try to push to do it this year. I'm not saying we won't push to do it this year, but we're going to try to move it as fast as we can to get it teed up, to resolve these motions, and to move forward. Now, whether I'm the Attorney General when this case gets tried or there's another person in the seat where I am, this case is going to get retried. And we will fight to bring justice to Maggie and Paul and to basically represent the state of South Carolina as best as we can on the national stage again. I have complete confidence in the office.
Yeah, well, I think it's a testament to the Democrat nominee for this seat, Richard Rissick. I actually interviewed him yesterday. He in fact said that he would keep the team that you chose for that trial in place if he were elected Attorney General. And that's the Democrat runner for that office. And certainly Solicitor David Stumbo, the Republican nominee, has also indicated he would continue to pursue this. Let me ask you this though. You've got this window of decision-making authority over this case, and you put the death penalty back on the table here as we head into a retrial. Is that a decision that you would make prior to leaving office?
All decisions, all courses of action, legal and otherwise, are on the table for discussion. My intent is to just make as many decisions as I can to get this case prepped up. Like I don't think anyone running for AG would begrudge the current AG from trying to wrap up as much of this case as we possibly can. So my intent is to make as many of the decisions and take all the considerations into account and do the best thing for the state. So yeah, I'm going to try to, yes, the short answer to your question is yes, I'm going to try to resolve all those questions before I leave office, even if that means the next AG will take over the prosecution of the case. If that next AG wants to change the direction at that time, that will be their decision. But I'm the Attorney General until I'm not. And I'm going to make the decisions the Attorney General makes until they're no longer mine to make.
A lot of folks argue the office you currently hold is more powerful than the one you are aspiring to. As you look back on the last 16 years and as you look forward to a potential Wilson gubernatorial administration, how do you see those differences, and how do you see, you mentioned challenges and opportunities earlier, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities in your mind at this transitional moment in your career?
Well, I mean, well, there's so many. First off, as I said a minute ago, I do not believe the office of governor is weak. I do believe the office of the Attorney General is incredibly strong constitutionally, stronger than people realize, which is why I have tried to approach it with a meek mindset. And I say meekness, or meek, does not mean weak. It means power under control. You know, the Office of the Attorney General has the ability to destroy lives, right? I mean, you send a SLED agent to someone's house, you indict someone and they lose their job and then they later get acquitted or gets dismissed. I mean, it's the power to destroy lives. You can affect business decisions on the civil side. And that's a position, I mean, even investigating someone, you know, there's people out there who may be bad at their jobs, but they're not corrupt. And there might be people out there who are corrupt, but very powerful. You have to have the courage to be able to go after the really corrupt people, but you also have to have the courage not to go after someone simply because you don't like their politics. And I have tried to be very judicious with that power. That is the same type of approach I'm going to take as the office of governor. Carol Campbell did more, I believe, to change the role of the governor as it related to the legislature than any governor in modern history, up until that point at least. He moved the needle further. Other governors have done other good things, but Carol Campbell was the first governor to really take a crack at it. Before I leave this office, assuming I win in November and take office, and assuming I get 8 years, I intend, as they say in Boy Scouts, to leave the campsite better than I found it, right? That means to increase the relevance of the office of governor as well as the entire executive branch of government relative to the legislature, which means there's going to be some friction there. But I believe when all three branches of government have equal power and have equal tension, equal tension among each other, the people are best served. That way one branch can't run roughshod over all the other two branches. You need that parity of power. I don't want more power than the other branches. I want parity of power, meaning equal power. And so that is going to be my goal as I go into this next 4 or 8 years.
General, you've been given an unprecedented mandate by Republican voters. You are poised to potentially receive a mandate from the voters of South Carolina. No pressure, right?
Look, I am overwhelmed, Will, by the results of this last Tuesday. And it is people call it a mandate, but to me, it's a charge. I've been charged with a responsibility by the voters of my party and hopefully by the general election voters in 4.5 months. And I'm gonna take it very seriously. And I've always said this to people. I've never promised people that I was gonna be a perfect governor. I've never promised that I won't make mistakes. I don't think anyone can look you in the eye and say that they will be perfect and they will win 100% of the time, but I've always promised that I would be accountable. I promised that I'd be accessible, and I promised that I would fight for people. I ran on a message, I ran on a vision, and I'm going to continue to run on that vision and that message, and then I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try to do what I said I was going to do. And if that offends people, so be it, okay? I've told legislators who were on the fence with me, they wanted me to support a particular bill, and I said, I'm not going to support this bill. And they're like, well, I'm not going to endorse you. And I said, I'd rather have your trust and your respect than your vote or your support. So I tell people all the time, I'm not afraid to offend people.
You said that on the gambling issue, that's right.
I did. I'm not, people can disagree with me on that. By the way, I'm also open to changing my mind. I'm willing to sit down with anyone on any issue and have a conversation. Doesn't mean I'll change my mind, but doesn't mean I won't. But I'll tell you this, if I agree with someone 90 times out of 100, I'm not going to focus on the 10 times we disagree, and I'm not going to burn that relationship. I say that to the Freedom Caucus, I say that to the Republican Caucus, I even say that to the Democratic Caucus. And by the way, those 3 caucuses, they have done a lot to help me with human trafficking. They've done a lot to help me with victims advocacy, protecting children online, creating a unit that goes around and help move the backlog in cases with the Violent Crimes Case Reduction Unit. And we reform victim services in this state, and those are all bipartisan, and obviously within the Republican caucus, they were very bipartisan as well. So there's so many issues that we can focus on that are unifying. So I have gone to those caucuses before, and they have been there for me. Yes, we fight on other issues, and I will fight hard for what I believe in, and I know they will fight for what they believe in. But at the end of the day, it's about doing the most good for the most people that we possibly can. And I am burning bridges left and right is not my way. That's why I don't start with attacking people. I start with talking with people. And then talking may turn into debating. Debating can turn into arguing, and arguing can turn into action. But you don't start with action. You have to start with a conversation. Try to understand what their interests are. Try to see where they're coming from. Even if you vehemently disagree with them on something, listen. But they also have to see your teeth, and they also have to see your ability, the old statement, talk softly, but
carry a big stick.
Carry a big stick. People I'm a nice guy, and sometimes people underestimate me because I am so nice. They see me as a meek person, but meekness doesn't mean weakness. Don't mistake my niceness for being a pushover. I've won how many races now in 16 years? 11?
I was going to say the universe of those underestimating you has shrunk considerably in the last few weeks.
I mean, my political obituary has been written many times.
I may have written a few of those.
I think you were the author of one or two of them, and fairly so, because at the time it did appear that I was dead in the water. I am very durable, I'm very resilient, and I have a belief system. I tell people all the time, this is what I believe. If you don't want to vote for me, that's your right, but this is what I believe. I'm going to respect your belief, you respect my beliefs. If we can find common ground, we will find it. But at the end of the day, Will, and you've interviewed me a lot, and I've made commitments to you. I've never lied about when I said I'm going to do something. I'll say I'm going to do X, and then I do X, and people get mad. Well, I said I was going to do it. So that's how I'm going to be as governor. I'm going to be very transparent.
General, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.